everyone, and Merry Christmas from Divided Films. My name is JJ, and with me, as always, is my co-host Keith.
525,600 hellos.
All right, getting into it already. Thank you for that, Keith.
I had to do something unique with this one.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. Joining us again today is our great friend Andy Martinez. Welcome back, Andy.
Do you hear the people say, oh.
Sorry,
oh. Hello, thank you
You
for
only had
having
one
me.
shot.
Yes, hello. Great to have you guys here in this merry season of Christmas. So we're chugging along during this holiday season, and today we're discussing the film adaptation of Rent, directed by Chris Columbus. This movie falls into the category of having a negative score with critics, only 46% approval, and a positive score from audiences, 83% approval. So quite a difference there. And the critics' consensus for Rent: fans of the stage musical may forgive Rent its flaws, but weak direction, inescapable staginess, and an irritating faux boho pretension prevent the film from connecting on screen. Kind of harsh. I'll say this too. Maybe a point of contention for me is weak direction. I think that kind of resonates with my opinion. Just given, the director of this film is Chris Columbus, who I feel is known mostly for very safe family films.
Yes, his
he was,
magnum opus, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
That's my favorite of his work.
Yeah.
But kind of an odd choice for what this play's subject matter is. This is, I would say, an adaptation, I should say, that would have benefited from a more edgy director, someone who would have maybe been a little more, not so conventional, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And this is a very conventionally filmed movie, and that kind of there's a disconnect there with how it's filmed and what the subject matter is. So I thought that was kind of a shame. It's like the safe way to adapt a musical.
That is.
But
what
about you guys?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that is such a succinct way to put my opinion, like in the most complete way. I could not agree more. I think that, as you were saying, the edginess is missing, and it's not something that benefits from having that taken away. And I'll start off right off the bat and just put this out there. I don't really like Rent. I've never really liked Rent. But that being said, I actually had a great conversation today with a coworker of mine where he put something very plainly, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. He said, it doesn't matter if the show is bad. If you're a good enough director and you have talented people, you can put on a good show, an entertaining show. And I think with theater, that is to some degree true. And the more I thought about that idea, especially when you consider translating one medium for another, especially to film, your possibilities for going as far as you want to go, especially with the budget that Hollywood has, is endless compared to theater. There's just so much more you can do. And I think that's what's so frustrating about movie musicals is that they have this endless budget, they have this endless amount of technological advantages at their disposal, and they can't seem, at least in my view, I know there have been some well-lauded movie musicals, like Chicago, that won a ton of Oscars.
Well, West Side Story is one of the most iconic movies of all time.
Exactly, and I think that it depends on material to material, but for some reason, over the past 20 years or so, in my view, there's not been a adaptation of a musical into a film where I came out of that saying, wow, that was a different way to view this work.
What do you think of? I would submit maybe Sweeney Todd is a good film adaptation of that musical.
It doesn't, in my view, I do like that movie, but for me, that is not a good adaptation of that musical. It's a good film. They take out plenty of what is in the musical itself so that they can make a more entertaining film. But there's in terms of the musical aspects of it, it's actually my least favorite part of that adaptation. Every time someone opens their mouth to sing, it'll be like such a long space in between songs that I almost forget that the movie has music, and I go, "Oh no, that's right." And I remember that Johnny Depp is a terrible singer, and it's just it
Yeah.
completely deflates that movie for me. And I like that movie, but those musical elements I try to like take out of it.
So interesting. So maybe we should then measure this adaptation of Rent as both: is it a good adaptation? A, and is it a good film in general? B,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there. Because you're right. I mean, you can have one and not the other, but ideally you have both,
Hmm.
right? Um, and I would have to say, you mentioned you don't like Rent, and when you say that, Keith, maybe you can add like a sound effect of people going like shocked, so, like oh, because
There are
I would
plenty
say
of
Rent.
people that don't like Rent. There are
They're out
plenty of
there.
people.
Well, I'll
They're
say
out
this:
there.
people who like Rent love Rent, and I feel like Rent is like a kind of like a theater kids musical in a way. There are people who grew up
Nerds.
with theater that I would say like there's a love for Rent amongst like the theater community of maybe like our generation. It's just something that resonated with not everybody that we were theater kids with, but a lot of people I would
I don't
say.
know how this could resonate with anyone in our age group who did not grow up between like
Well, I would say
1982 to like
certain themes of like I don't know being like an outcast and the struggle, things like that, and also just having visibility for like you know um, gay characters, like those kind of things, like LGBT characters. I think that alone, the visibility is enough for maybe young kids who grew up without a lot of that representation in general. So
sure.
I would
Yeah.
I would say that that's like the perspective there. I'm not crazy about Rent myself. I like it
Yeah.
fine. If anything, each time I've heard the music, it's grown on me a bit. But I agree, I'm not like a huge fan. But I will say this: after watching the movie recently, I actually watched on YouTube a recording of the original production towards the end of the run, just to give me a different perspective because I'd never seen a stage version of it, and it definitely kind of validated what I thought about the movie. But Keith, what about you? I mean, you're also a theater kid like the rest of us. So what was your take on Rent or your experience with it?
I mean, compared to other theater kids, I'm like theater kid light. Uh, when like Rent, when I really kind of discovered Rent, uh, I kind of was a contrarian about it just because all the other theater kids were so gung ho, and I like the music. That was like one thing I'm like, yeah, okay. I The music has really stuck with me. At least a good amount of it has, and high school and then college where I ran into a bunch of other theater kids, you guys included. It's a good show to like make fun of the ideas of it. Like for me, it's just pay your rent. I didn't think Benny was, especially watching this movie. I think I saw this movie first. I've never seen it on stage, but the movie was the first introduction to it, and Benny to me wasn't that bad of an antagonist or that bad of a guy. He was. We can go into like the plot holes of. I do think, Andy, there is a disconnect between going from a play to a movie, because that's when the plot holes really get seen in a lot of really good musicals. But I kind of maybe not so watching this movie. I still think this movie. So I don't think Chris Columbus was the right choice. I think it's a very basic, bland. And watching the movie Tick Tick Boom, not in preparation for this. I really just kind of watched it. And that's actually a really well done musical. It deserves all its praise. I may appreciate Rent the musical, but we have to kind of separate the musical and the movie here. And the movie itself was.
But see that to me though is the essence of what this is. Everyone comes into it with, even if they haven't seen the musical, they have a preconceived notion that it was on stage. And that is something that you cannot escape, I think, with your audience as a director. When you're translating something that comes from a different medium, you have to consider the fact that your audience is coming into that expecting that. And especially if it's something like Rent that was hugely popular when it was on stage, very successful, I think it held
12 years.
it held the
I
title
read.
for longest running show for a while.
It's up there.
It was up there. I think from what I read, it ran on a main stage Broadway show. It ran from '96 to 2000 2008. I think it was actually originally an off-Broadway show, but because of how popular it was, to meet demand, they moved it to a main stage
Right.
Broadway show, Broadway theater, and it ran there for about 12 years. So yeah, definitely long running.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, the movie was a box office loss, right?
Yeah.
And so I think another big mistake too, and this goes into like, Chris Columbus as the director. It's kind of like a conventional Hollywood film. I think they try to make this like a broadly appealing movie, whereas maybe if this was like an independent film, a lower budget adaptation that actually just try to like market towards like the more like niche audience. I don't think this works as a broad, general audience kind of film. I think this maybe like focus on your audience who you really like, and I maybe you want to branch this out to new people who aren't as familiar, but for the most part it still feels like you're watching a play for a lot of this movie, and not everyone is into that. So I think that was a mistake.
Do you think that maybe casting had something to do with it too? Because there's this whole thing now with movie musicals where it's like they cannot cast a single popular musical movie without like some huge star, even if they can't sing. And I think because this version went with casting 6 of the original Broadway actors into the main roles, I wonder if that had something to do with it too, that no one was like, oh wow, here's this famous movie star now gonna sing in a movie. That's kind of interesting. I feel like because after that point, every other movie did that. Sweeney Todd, Les Mis had Hugh Jackman. I mean, they got lucky with that because he actually can sing. Into the Woods.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. Because then you have another thing too. I was thinking about as well is that this is a movie that's made and released when the show is still running in its original run, and some of the other shows that maybe, or some of the other film adaptations of musicals we like, are kind of after the fact, and you give it maybe some time. So I don't know. That's tough. I like the idea of seeing the original Broadway cast performing, but at the same token, that's not going to bring in the masses if you want to make this more widely appealing. They have Rosario Dawson, who I think is the only person that was not in the original Broadway production at one point or another.
Yeah, I read online though that she was only cast because they tried to get the original Mimi from Broadway, and she was pregnant at the time and couldn't perform. So that was when they were left with Rosario Dawson, which I couldn't find anything online, but I'm wondering if she did her actual singing in this movie, because like I've never heard of her being described as like a singer or like being on stage at any point. Like I feel like she's just been a film actress.
The only movie I can think of where she does any singing is Josie and the Pussycats, which I like. It's a very dumb movie. I think she sings in that. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. Not someone who's known for being a singer. I don't know. The voice didn't seem like it was coming from someone else, but who knows?
I bet this movie also didn't have a good word of mouth. I bet people like, oh, what'd you think? Like wait until the DVD, wait until HBO. Like you don't need to go out and pay this. I have no I mean, granted, the example that I just thought that could work is In the Heights, but even though that was on HBO Max, that's also considered a box office failure, and that kind of doesn't have that famous, like Anthony Ramos to me is only from Hamilton. You're only getting the Hamilton people. But
at least critically, I think In the Heights is a good adaptation.
In the Heights is excellent. It just didn't do. It is considered a box office failure. Unfortunately,
well, I think too. I mean, there's also like the whole streaming thing going on now. That's way different from like there's
different bar.
There's that whole issue between this like warring ideological kind of battle happening between like people that are like, well, having streaming have everything immediately available is nice, but then people especially filmmakers and artists are like, well, our movies are meant to be seen on the big screen. Like why?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
but
I feel
my cynical theory
that had something to do with it. No, you're good.
My cynical theory is that this is 2005, 2004, let's say. I think Christopher Columbus needed a job, and this has been on the shelf for a few years. We needed where are musicals going? Okay, we got Rent. I think there was maybe a musical before. Let's bring this out. Christopher Columbus. It's kind of the same way Guy Ritchie got Aladdin. and because you can see no passion, no, like, Christopher Columbus has directed good shit. He's very good at whimsy. He is very good at whimsy.
Yeah, but
he was.
what's his connection to this show?
No,
Harry
there's nothing.
Potter is his connection to Rent.
There's nothing whimsical. There was nothing whimsical, and this is probably the fault of the studio as well. This is just a very cynical. Like, there's no passion in this filmmaking. It's very basic. It's just very put the camera. There should have been there were some fantastical sequences, and the only reason that the Seasons of Love works as like standout is because they're all just standing on a stage. It sets the tone for the entire movie. But that works because it's kind of basic.
Because most of the sequences, I would say, like most of the songs, aren't doing anything to elevate it for film.
No.
Right? They're not doing anything that you couldn't do on a stage, except just have like just a full actual location of an apartment or wherever else you are. I think the only sequence that I thought was like an interesting, like you're doing something you couldn't do on stage, was the Without You sequence, when you see like, you know, people in the support group fade one by one, and you see like a more dramatic deterioration of the Angel character as she succumbs to AIDS. And I thought, okay, like that's something you can't maybe as portray it effectively as on stage. So yeah, I thought that was a sequence that worked, but all the other sequences, again, they're just kind of either walking around, you know, the characters are just like in the space, and there's no interesting camera movement. There's no real interesting things that they're doing that, if anything, it works better on stage. Because the show Rent, I get a sense that it's kind of almost like a concert feel. You know, it's a rock genre musical, and a lot of times when you watch the stage version or recording the stage version, there's a lot of engagement with the audience, as if you're at a concert. You know, it kind of reminds me of Hair in a way, where, you know, the characters are just kind of like singing about their lives, and they kind of interact with the audience a little bit. There's an intimacy there that a film could never really capture, at least not the way Chris Columbus is doing it.
This movie would have done if someone thought at the studio to do what Hamilton did, because I don't think Hamilton would be I could be wrong. I'm willing to eat crow on it if it ever gets made, but I don't think Hamilton could be a good movie. But it was a good what they did. That was my introduction to Hamilton. I'm 5 years late on it, I know, but I really enjoyed, they shot it for 3 days. They did a live showing, and then it came out. I think Rent would have been a better fit for that, but that was like what? That's 12 years too late for that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what interest there is now. Maybe if the show is revived on Broadway eventually and there's renewed interest, but I think people for the most part have moved on from that show. And like I said, if you maybe waited to do a film adaptation until maybe over 10 years after the original Broadway run had ended, then that's a chance to revive interest. But they kind of jumped the gun on that, I would say. It's kind of like a cash grab. It's like, oh, this is a popular show that's running now, so let's just make a musical out of that now. It's the same thing with like Dear Evan Hansen. It's like, what's the most popular musical right now? Well, let's do it. Let's get it in the theater. It's like, no,
let's put this 40-year-old in high school.
yeah, it's obviously you see the dollar sign potential, but there's no real creative need to do that.
How do you write a song when the chords sound wrong, though they once sounded right and rare? When the notes are sour, where is the power you once had to ignite the air? We're hungry and frozen from life that we've chosen. How we gonna pay? How we gonna pay? How we gonna pay? Last year's rent.
Andy, how do you feel about old school plays? And I may because I've been watching some old school plays during this whole past year of like West Side Story, Sound of Music. Let's even go with the Rodgers and Hammerstein of you were in Oklahoma, but does that translate well to you?
I think in terms of the musicality, yes. I think the way that those shows are written with their musical style is definitely something that I kind of prefer in a musical. I mean, today it's kind of hard to find something that is so classically arranged orchestrally and vocally. So you kind of have to take your pick of the litter at what stuff is more influenced by that while still being something new. But that's generally what I gravitate towards musically. I think in terms of their stories, though, they're kind of well, I mean, besides being just dated, they also are kind of just very emblematic of that entire era, both in theater and film, where everything had to be like this big, huge, grand production where everything is just over the top and overblown and very cheesy. And that stuff's great and it's very entertaining. But I also think that back then it was easier once they started making films of those musicals to translate that into screen, because at that time, movie musicals and stage musicals kind of went hand in hand. They were both trying to achieve the same thing, and thus they translated a little bit better. Like the film versions of Oklahoma and Carousel are pretty excellent, but they're also, you expect that from that time. Now it's like the way that we've advanced theatrically with stuff on stage, being able to adapt it into a film is asking to take away some of what makes the show so important to be viewed on stage. Because now the way we write shows and the way the music coordinates with everything, we're able to produce these incredible productions with all these different technological advancements with lights. Now we have rear screen projection. Part of the whole gimmick of going to theater now is to experience what kind of magic they're able to produce. And I think putting it to film is a reductionist kind of view, because you're like you were saying, JJ, where everything is supposed to be kind of connecting to the audience in some way, shape, or form, whether it's like a fourth wall break. I think now more than ever, theater is more concerned with getting the audience as engaged with the work as they possibly can with little detachment. And I'm talking probably strictly in the sense of musicals, because with plays, obviously, there's a lot more experimentation going on there these days. But with musicals, to say that you're going to make a film adaptation of something like Dear Evan Hansen, I mean, you're mitigating so much of what made that thing special in the first place by just taking it out of its home and putting it. That's why it's like, and I would date this kind of argument back to the time when Rent was coming about, because you had great, impressive productions going on at that time, especially when you think about like Les Mis and these revivals of Showboat and Carousel. There was so much magic already being produced at that level. And for something like Rent, I mean, I've never seen the original Broadway production. I've never really seen pictures of it, but I can imagine that part of the allure of that show must have been just the set for the apartment and just how.
I'll show you, because it has a very. I'll show you, but I'll tell you, it has a very underground feel to it. A lot of like repurposed materials on the set. There's like different levels. It feels like you're more in an alleyway, right? And then the backdrop is kind of like that, and then obviously you have, like you imagine where they are for most of the show, right? So there's an imagination that's required from the audience that obviously you're kind of spoon-fed from a filmmaking point of view. And, the whole feel of the show feels kind of like underground alternative, where, the movie, I think, maybe could have benefited from maybe more like handheld camera work as opposed to like steady cam work, something to make it feel a little more, it feels too produced.
Yeah, I'll say this. In terms of how it looks, the film needed to either be extravagantly vibrant and perhaps produce a wide array of, color grading that was perhaps a little more, like kind of like Moulin Rouge, or it needed to be grimier and grittier and more akin to the natural. I was missing that. Yeah, and more akin to the natural element of the setting of the show. This movie does neither. It's like right in the middle. Everything is evenly shot with all of this like washed out natural lighting. It looks like boring. It just looks like they stepped out into the street. Yeah.
I feel like the pacing is a little off too, because a lot of scenes end with like a fade to black and then the next scene, whereas in the show it goes from one song to the next. It almost feels like an operetta at times. because you're just going, you know, and obviously too, because it's all just one space and you imagine where they are, things can flow more freely and you can like maintain that kinetic energy of the show.
Yeah,
and it's consistently like stop and go, right? It's another example how it's just not it's not translating as well. So maybe if you maybe did something where like it looks like one shot through many different locations or something like that, that could have been a little more interesting. But I'm just direly missing that.
The most important element, I think, when capturing a stage production into a film is you have to give the music a new home. You have to make it fit into that new kind of format that you're giving it. And that's why back in the day, in the golden age of Hollywood and in theater, that translated so well because both film and theater were equally theatrical.
Yeah.
They had.
Yeah, I was gonna say those old movie musicals from like the 60s, 50s, 60s. They had like a style to them, right? You had these like wide shots of big choreography and ensembles, right? It kind of, you know, you kind of felt you're on the set yourself when you're watching some of those movies. And here they try to make them feel more like realistic in a way, like you're actually in that real location, but we're singing. So like, what is it? Are we in this elevated area, or are we to imagine like, no, we're in a grounded New York City, but they also just happen to be singing?
You have to give the rush to your audience when watching a movie, the same rush that they experience once they hear live music in a theatrical setting, because if not, then you're just boring them to shit. And it's like it's literally so painful watching some of these, especially for stuff that you love. Like I remember the first time I saw Les Mis in theaters. I love Les Mis, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but I mean you could do a little bit better than what they put out. I'm not saying it's terrible. It's just like Les Mis is already so long that if any part of it is lacking, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Because then it makes it feel 4 hours longer. So
and then it starts like this.
Yeah, and then you just get tired of it real quick and you have to bail. But
I mean, Rent is kind of long too, right? I mean, Rent is over 2 hours. I mean, most musicals I would say go over 2 hours, even when you take out the intermission, right? So, and having watched the recording of the stage version, they did cut some stuff out. There's some songs in the stage version they cut out, and it was still over a 2 hour movie. So I think that's hard for a lot of people to sit through, especially when it's lacking energy.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's when if you're going to make a movie like that, you need to make it a lot shorter so you can at least spare everyone else the embarrassment of sitting to the end, because it's just bad.
To add to the like the modern theatrics, with I would say, we had the 50s and 60s. We had those great musical movies, and then I'm not saying they weren't around during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but it kind of came back with Chicago and Moulin Rouge, and even those. With Chicago, you have the plot, and then every time there's a song, they're on stage, and it looks like you're watching a play. Moulin Rouge is more, you're at a circus. It's so colorful. I think, however you feel about Baz Luhrmann, he is built for that kind of production. And then I would say after that, those two movies made a lot of money. So what do we have? What do we have in the back lot? They have Rent. They have Sweeney Todd. They have Rock of Ages. They have Les Mis. It kind of continued, and you
make a movie version of Rock of Ages.
They did. I forgot.
I saw
and
the
they
stage
shouldn't.
version.
They shouldn't have, but they did.
I saw the stage version on a New World Stage. I think Rock of Ages has to be the only show I've ever seen where I thought that was objectively bad. Like, there's
really,
I can't even see someone saying like, "Yeah, that was good." Like, no, like that, it's like at a basement level, compared to like any
really, wow.
I'm talking about I mean, I could not believe that's the first time I was sitting and watching any stage of anything, going like, I'm genuinely unimpressed by what I'm watching.
But yeah, no, it's been a while since I watched Sweeney Todd, and I could
I love that
see
one.
Andy, I could see your sentiments, and at least Tim Burton had a vision. At least and this was at the height of Johnny Depp's, like, this was his peak. This was the height of him. This was nothing.
I was watching the like making up because I rewatched Sweeney Todd around Halloween, and I think even though musically maybe it's not as executed well, there's like a spirit to it. Like I think they get the essence of the show. So
Oh
like even
yeah.
having fun with some like some innovation with how they make the chair that goes back and the blood squirting and everything like that with the makeup and the prosthetics and everything like that. I think they're having fun from a production level that probably the stage version had back in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like you have to if you kind of connect with a show behind the scenes and you kind of like tune in to what they were trying to do in terms of like like behind the curtain. If you do that behind the camera, that could help you translate to what you actually see as the final product.
When a musical is bad or you're even met on it, you start noticing other stuff. And at least with Les Mis, I love Les Mis too. It's kind of, there's some plot. Granted, I'm not thinking about the plot when I'm watching it. I'm amazed by the music. Same thing but I remember watching this movie. I'm just going like, oh man, like, and I'm sure Benny is a better character in the musical, but he is
in the musical.
dog
I was
shit
watching
in this.
Benny. They make him more cocky and pompous, right? Like he's kind of dressed like sort of like I guess like what a yuppie would have looked like in the mid '90s or something. But he has this like very like this arrogance about him that does not translate in the movie. In the movie, he's just like a guy who's like, come on, just pay the rent.
Yeah, no, he's like, I'm giving you. I felt really bad. I'm like,
you
he's
don't
like,
see it.
He's giving Mark. This is what I would always complain about. Like he's giving everyone what they wanted, and Mark is okay. I think Mark, is okay filming homeless people, and they don't want to be filmed. And
that's another thing.
I just had problems with that. At least like it could translate better on stage, but I was just like, it just made me not like these people.
Well, yeah, because you mentioned the homeless people. So there's you have your ensemble in Rent, and a lot of them play like the same like homeless characters throughout the show, or the same support group characters. So you kind of get a better established sense of what this neighborhood is in the stage version, right? And they even have songs themselves like in between scenes, and it kind of adds this sort of operetta feel. Because I guess this was, from what I read, based on like I don't know, some Italian opera like La Boheme or something like that.
It is, yeah.
And so in the movie, even though you're literally like on location in like East Village, Lower East Side area, you don't really get a sense that they're establishing that world very well. Even though you're actually there, which is kind of crazy. Like if you maybe did the same thing, you have the same recurring extras or tertiary characters, you could have maybe built that sense of a neighborhood better. I don't like a lot of this movie seems to be like, oh, the neighborhood. You have your tent city. We're not going to pay rent in this whole neighborhood. You don't really feel that connection with that world.
It's supposed to be in the musical. It's probably supposed to be a much more formalized and heightened sense of reality that is made, kind of very vibrant and characteristic on the stage. And in this movie, it looks like they're just walking out into like West 4th Street and just like filming for a couple seconds, and people are walking by like, what is going on?
No, but if there was that fantastical element to it, you could forgive a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could. If there was some sort of more affection for that world of like late 80s, the world, like the art movement of that time when New York was still like really grimy, right? It had not yet gotten out of that like dark period where it was just like a really dangerous place to be at whatever time. This felt like the clean 2000s version of the city that had become at the time. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I feel like I get the connection too, more so with people at the time. This play comes out in 1996, just 7 years after it takes place, and people probably still, it's fresh in their minds, this whole AIDS epidemic. And so like I can understand the need to want to tell these stories, right? Like the story of like these characters who are dealing with HIV and AIDS and everything. Like I find that very compelling on paper. So like watching the show, I feel like you have to like try to tap into that a little bit, and the movie's not asking you to do that.
Yeah, no, it's really, it's very detached from the source material. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the show. That's just me. But I don't, disregard the fact that it is incredibly successful.
Yeah.
And like you said, it probably had a lot to do with the time it came out. Like that was just a period of history that was very, very sad that people still had fresh in their minds. Probably they lost someone during that period.
Yeah.
Especially if you lived in New York. I mean, I did a show with someone who was living in New York around that time, and she said that she lost like a ton of friends because she worked in theater, a lot of artists. It was very, very sad. But it's that the movie is not. Affection is such a good word to speak about what's missing here, because especially with theater, it's such a passionate art form, and again, if you're gonna give that music a new home, then you better do it service and you better make it comfortable so that it can really soar. Because it's like, and again, you could do a great show if you put your mind to it. There's a way to do it, even if it's not a great show or a show you don't even like. There's a way to make it interesting because the stage has that communal aspect to it where you can ask a lot out of your audience in the moment, and because there's so many people around them, there's like that added kind of pressure to like engage with whatever's going on. So you can always influence your audience correctly, but when you make it into a film, because it's not happening in front of that audience, you need to make up for that fact, and it's a monumental task. And if you don't have affection or even passion for the work, then it just falls so flat. And this movie is so flat. That's the problem. It's such a drag.
I know, it's too bad. I mean, there are ways for films to like engage with viewers and to establish intimacy, right? And yeah, there's ways to do it. And any material can be done well, right? I don't want to put any limits and say, maybe nothing should be made into a film. Like, maybe there was a time watching this and then watching the stage version, I'm thinking like maybe they shouldn't have made a film version of Rent, but at the same time, like it is possible to make a good.
Oh,
film
it's
version
possible. It's like 3 movies that are just out recently that Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. I watched an interview with him, and damn it, he wanted to make this movie for so long. He grew up on it in the 60s, and I haven't seen the movie yet, but it's getting. I read a review saying it's top tier Spielberg, and from what I could judge from the trailer, it's made with a lot of passion. It's a Spielberg movie, but it seems like it's breathing new life into this West Side Story. I mean,
it better be, because he made Ready Player One, so he's got a lot to make up for.
I mean, the guy's been working for 5 decades, but yeah, no, if you like style and passion, and then you can go over to something like In the Heights that add this like. If In the Heights was made the same way Rent was, it would just be this boring, like, In the Heights had this fantastical element, like, when they go to the pool, there's this nice choreography, there's colors, they're dancing on the side of the wall.
I thought In the Heights was tapping into the old tradition of musical filmmaking, where you have these, like, large spanning shots and in the big choreography, in the pool or whatnot. Or there's also like a sense of like magical realism, right? And with these like,
thank God it wasn't filmed this way.
That's why I loved La La Land, because La La Land kind of recalls a lot of that golden era as well. There's like such a sweeping kind of atmospheric edge to that movie that is just so enchanting. And I think it's doing its own thing. I wouldn't necessarily call that movie a traditional movie musical, because there's like a long stretch of maybe 40 minutes where there are no songs in that movie. So it's trying to do something else, but it definitely it has that kind of magic to it. And I really want to see the In the Heights musical.
The Heights.
Because the talk about like you were saying before, like talk about a show with like kind of that heightened realism. Like the world in that show is so vibrant and so alive, and so they're like, that not even the characters that just themselves, the set itself is kind of a character in that way. So Hopefully it does that right. I didn't get to see it, but if you
But
guys are
no, but
raving
even
about
like
it, then
John Chu, who directed it, he adds this like. I'm sure there's a passion there. I don't doubt that. But even like with the directing style, like the editor for that the editor deserves some like recognition just on how the quick shots, the close-ups on the cup of coffee, like it was amazing. And I think he's going to do a fine job with Wicked. I think when I heard that he was announced to be the director for Wicked, I'm like, perfect. And I think the cast is also. They only did Glinda and Elphaba, but so far, I think it's in good hands with him.
Okay, I mean that one makes sense. I think to put into a film. We'll see. But yeah, I mean you have to like maybe bring some new things to the table, right? I mean I'm starting to think too, like with this film, right? What if you added like something visual to capture like the music of the film, because like music is such a huge part, not like because it's a musical, because the characters are musicians, or they're artists basically. So like what if you had like, I don't know, some sort of like visual representation of the energy in the music that the characters put out, and it's reflective of the roller coaster that they go on throughout the movie, like something like that, just to like something unexpected, right? Like in La La Land, I feel like there are times where like there's like unexpected camera movements, or like transitions that follow the pattern of the music. The music dictates what the rest of the film is doing. So you have to also like kind of take people by surprise. I want someone to do something that I would not have thought to do.
Ginsberg, Dylan, Cunningham, and Cage, Lenny Bruce, Langston Hughes,
Tuesdays!
Sabuda, Papa Neruda, White Dorothy and Coda went over the rainbow to blow up Antiem. La Viva. Sisters?
We're close.
Well, with the actors too, this cast, like I feel bad because obviously, you might say on paper like, oh, you maybe if you had more stars in there, it would have been maybe a little more appealing. But I like that these actors are getting some exposure in a major film, because I think the actors are doing a good job for the most part. I think the director kind of lets them down, but yeah, I think and I recognize some of these actors from some other things.
yeah,
right?
no,
like the guy who,
I don't think
right?
necessarily for me I needed to have to be a star vehicle. I'm just saying like in terms of why it was probably a box office kind of disappointment might have been due to that.
Yeah, I
but
agree. That's like
I
no one knows who these
prefer.
people are.
Yeah, I mean, I personally prefer if you're going to put anyone in a movie musical, put people that can sing, and your best bet is to get the people that were in the original Broadway cast. I mean, that for me is a no-brainer. That's
I like that they respected the cast enough to get as many of them in there as they could, and what is it? Some of these actors, I saw again. I've seen them in a few other things. I know Keith, you're a fan of The Flash, the TV show, or at least you watched it at the time, because
I was.
That was you were up to a point.
That's bizarre.
But that's the guy, right? That's that actor who plays.
Yeah, that is.
Collins. It's funny that I recognize that actor too, because he I think he got a start in Law and Order in the 90s, like the original Law and Order.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to do this in the stage version, and then he goes on to play another cop in something else. Like he's like a straight-laced cop, and then he's like this I don't know, like gay vagabond, like computer teacher rebel, and then he goes back to being a straight-laced cop again.
Well, I mean, I guess they did have Taye Diggs come back for this, and Taye Diggs definitely got the biggest out of everyone in that original Broadway cast. So having him, I guess you could argue, and Rosario Dawson, who, if we're talking 2005,
I would argue
she was
Idina Menzel.
Nah, Idina back then was still just Broadway.
Oh, back then, I mean, like I would say she's probably the biggest now, right?
Not in movies, really. I wouldn't say, because I've only really seen her in, besides Frozen, I only saw her in Uncut Gems, and she played like a
I would say Frozen is like a big
yeah, but it's
like
sure,
but it's not her. Like it's her voice, and like people, I don't think know. I would say like maybe half of the audience of Frozen probably doesn't know what Idina Menzel looks like. They just know her as Elsa.
John Travolta didn't even know how to say her name.
That's right.
Yeah, true.
Just that was like 10 years ago, right?
I still don't know. Like,
Adele Dazeem.
wait, what has Tay Diggs been in? I
Well,
know who Tay
Diggs
Diggs
in the
is.
'90s after Rent. Like
Okay.
immediately
How Stella
after,
got her groove
well,
back. Come
yeah,
on.
I mean he was a huge
Okay.
sex symbol back then. So like he having him and Rosario Dawson, who in the early 2000s was like pretty popular. I guess maybe I retract my statement a little bit. There is like some star power in that movie.
Minor, right? Like there's like there's no A-listers. It's not like, oh, we got to get like Tom Hanks in there.
I can't pay my rent.
You got Sarah Silverman.
That's like the worst
You got
person I
Sarah
could
Silverman.
Can't pay my
Sarah
rent.
Silverman. Sarah's. I don't know why. I think I just listed like the worst possible person you could have mentioned as an example to be in Rent.
Jimmy Dugan from A League of Their Own in Rent.
Oh boy. But anyways, you got yeah, I guess Tay Diggs in a few things. Or you know who else? I mean, this is I can't remember her name, but the actress who plays Joanna or Joanne. I reckon she had some parts after this. I think she was in like Devil Wears Prada.
I see her and stuff.
Right, she's in some things here and there, but again, like got to a movie just for her. But again, like I like the cast, and I wish this movie was more successful, just because who knows what it would have done for all of their careers.
Yeah,
but this movie is banking on the love that you have for Rent.
Right.
To put your butt in the seat. And I think at the end of the day, most people probably do what I do and watch or listen to the songs that they want to.
Right.
From this movie.
That's why I say it's like a concert. It's like an album, It's like you can listen to it and rock out to it. And you might know the context to it, might make it more effective for you if you do really like the show. But if not, like, there's some. I was humming some songs afterwards. I think, there's definitely some catchy songs in the show. I think the only song I maybe don't really like is the title song, Rent. I think that's like the only thing that I didn't find to be very catchy.
Rent.
88888888888.
Well, I'm still confused about and I need someone to explain this to me. Did Angel kill that dog?
Angel killed that dog. That's what she alluded to.
He's singing about he's singing like I killed my neighbor's dog.
Yep.
And okay. And everyone's just like, yeah.
There's actually a joke.
There's
a joke in the stage version where because it's Benny's dog, and Benny even says like, I never liked that dog. It's like, what? That doesn't make it okay. It's fine. That dog sucked.
So no one can. I mean, yeah, no one can defend that. Like whenever I say like, oh yeah, Benny killed a dog, and we're all singing about, or not Benny, Angel.
It was my lucky day today on Avenue A when a lady in a limousine drove my way. She said, "Darling, be a dear. Haven't slept in a year. I need your help to make my neighbor's yappy dog disappear. This Akita, Epita, just won't shut up. I believe if you play non-stop, that pup will breathe its very last high-strung breath. I'm certain that cur will bark itself to death."
Andy, why don't you like the play?
It just doesn't. It doesn't jive with me. I'm not really into the music. It's not my type of musical in that regard, and I'm just like, I'm not a huge fan of the characters, honestly. Like, I don't really.
I got you.
I think that they're interesting, but I feel like overall how they're written and the play overall is written, I would say that it's a little all over the place for me, and I feel like I don't really have a lot to be emotionally invested in. So and like some people, they prefer like that type of musical that is kind of just, it has like a thin plot that's being thread through the entire thing to like string the songs together.
Yeah.
But I need some emotional investment in the plot, and I think that's why I tend to prefer more classically driven stuff, because or I mean just anything that has like a stronger plot in a musical.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, try catching it. It's on YouTube. If you get a chance to like watch some of it, not the whole thing if you don't want to, but try just giving it a shot, just to give you a sense of like how it's probably more effective to see it on stage.
Yeah, because I've seen community theater productions of it, and I think I don't know if that's
Okay.
influenced my opinion a little bit. I'm not trying to
Maybe.
shit on community theater. I've done plenty of community theater, and those, anyone who gets on stage is a winner in my book. It takes a lot of balls, but I there have been some miscalculations in that world, so I would say that maybe that influenced my decision a little bit.
I think maybe also just the hype going the other way. I think is usually a deterrent for a lot of people because it's
Yeah.
kind of like if you don't get it, then the more people who say why don't you love it, it kind of turns you
Yeah,
off more.
I have a problem with that. And I'm trying to remedy it because I have this thing where if something is even a little bit hyped up, I'll almost just like not watch it out of spite because I'm tired of people. I'm tired of
Yo,
being asked more than
I
twice.
do that too.
And
I call that. I mentioned this before in a different episode, but I call that like the English patient effect. Remember in Seinfeld,
I
the more
just
people
watched that. Yes.
the more people are bothered by Elaine not liking the English patient, the more she hates it. So I totally get that.
And I don't think like that ever affects my final opinion of anything I ingest because I know I'm eventually going to watch it. Like I didn't watch Parasite for the longest time because people just wouldn't stop bothering me, and I almost did it to like spite them. But I knew that I would like it. Like I saw like the trailers for that movie. I knew about that director, and I was like, all right, I am gonna watch it. And it was an excellent movie. Like that never affects my final opinion. I just have issues. And then, like
I get the resistance.
I still haven't seen Bo Burnham's special for.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that either.
For that same reason. No, because everyone recommends that to me, and I'm just I know I'll like it.
I was slow to Squid Games for the same reason. It's like, all right, I'll get to it, fine, and I wind up loving it, of course.
Yeah, give me a break.
But I'm glad for people who it does resonate with. Again, I think maybe they identify with one or two of the characters. I agree. Not all the characters are like the Maureen character. I find to be very obnoxious, but at the same time, I find Angel, if performed properly, I feel like the Angel character can be very compelling. At least alone, that storyline alone could be be enough to win some people over.
It could have benefited from a better writer too.
Yeah. Just
no offense to this guy, but it could have benefited from a better writer.
Yeah, exactly. To adapt into a better screenplay, and again, just a better director, someone who maybe would have taken more chances and maybe tried to tap into again that kind of underground feel because even when they went, I was reading when they went from off Broadway to Broadway, they went to like a derelict theater on Broadway. It was like a rundown Broadway theater. Like they were still kind of tapping into this like starving artist mentality, which I dig that, a principle at least. The reason why I picked Rent, I guess, as our like final episode this season was just because, it does like start and end on Christmas Eve. I'm not sure why, like what the point is for having the narrative start. I guess just it's like a year's time, Oddly enough, too, the second movie in a row that's a Christmas movie that has gay interracial relationships. Those are just a dime a dozen, I guess. It just comes with the territory. I don't know. That was because we talked about the family stuff.
It was a hot thing in 2005.
Yeah.
That was also 2005. That's right. That was a weird mini trend we had going on there. But who knows why?
Take me for what I am, who I was meant to be. And this year's birthday, take me, baby. Oh, take me, baby. Take me, oh, leave me. Take me, baby. Or leave me. Yes, I'm leaving. I'm gone.
So I think we can get into our final thoughts and our percentage scores for Rent. So Andy, start us off. What would be your percentage score for Rent?
My percentage score would be a 42%.
Okay, 42. So more in line with the critics there. Keith?
Even if you're a fan of the play, and this is not an indictment on the play itself, this is the movie, and I think we went over why we feel the way we feel. As I said, you're probably gonna go back and just watch Seasons of Love or even listen to it.
Yeah. Just
Maybe a song or two. I give it a 50. No Christmas points.
I'm gonna go a little easy on this movie, just because I don't know, the Rent itself has grown on me a little bit, but I think for people out there who really like it, good for them. And I think maybe it could be introductory to the show if like there's I don't know like.
Yeah. I will say the Phantom of the Opera movie is a hot pile of human shit, but it did introduce me to Phantom of the Opera, which is not a great musical, but when I was a kid, I loved the music. Loved it.
Right, yeah. That's a good point.
I still kind of do.
I think Phantom of the Opera is like even like it's like the same issues, just like more exacerbated. It's like, what's the most obvious way we can make this adaptation with no interesting creative choices at all?
Well, what is the worst actor that we can cast in the most coveted tenor role in all of musical theater? Is a man who sounds like he has gravel running through his throat at all times. Let's cast him.
That Schumacher?
Yes.
Schumacher, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you would have thought. I don't know. So for my percentage, I'm feeling generous. It is the holiday time, so sorry, I'm not a Grinch like some people.
That's true.
But I will. I don't know. I'll give this like a 60%. I don't know why. I'm just landing on that, even though I do think I'm frustrated with the choices that were made, but I don't know. That's just how I'm feeling.
Oh my God!
It
I got a D-. I'm gonna graduate.
I put this on Chris Columbus's shoulders. Like this is his.
This is 1492 Productions.
What a huge misstep for 1492 Productions.
50.6 Productions, because that's what we landed on.
50.6%.
50.6.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair, right down the middle there. So, it is official on Rent. We are siding with the critics. That is our Christmas gift to the critics. Okay, so yeah, maybe this won't be a Christmas classic per se for anybody. Who knows? But hopefully you guys all watch your favorite Christmas movies during this holiday time. We have one more episode left. We have a bonus episode left for you this season, so look out for that. It's a holiday-themed bonus episode. But Andy, thanks as always for coming on the pod.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
And hope everyone has a great, merry holiday season. Thanks a lot. Bye.